So my name is Beatrice. Everyone calls me B. I am from Naples, Florida. 26 years old. From Naples, but over the last 6 years. Oh, we have a visitor. Over the last over the last 6 years, I've really kind of lived in a handful of different places, including West Coast and East Coast, California, Florida, North Carolina, New York, etc. Currently residing in Chicago for the summer, which I'm absolutely loving and adoring. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
The you kind of like race through them, but you've lived in like 10 places in the last,
Yes, I
and
have.
I wonder if that'll come up as a part of maybe why we're sharing some thoughts here. But um, it's interesting. Before we got on, you were telling me about how there was. It would just jump right into some of the challenges you were facing before we started talking, having conversation. Um, talking about boot camp and even just what that would look like and what coaching is. And
hmm
you were saying that there was just some, whether it was shame around decision making, there was difficulty in decision making, or lack of real conviction or confidence in decision making. So
hmm
maybe share like a little bit about how if somebody's watching, they're like, what kind of challenges were you facing when you were thinking about connecting with me, and where were you at
Yeah.
in life?
Yeah. I actually was thinking about it a little more when we were setting up and just some of the background and reflecting on the last few years of my life and where my journey has been. During COVID, I moved home from California in a place of a lot of shame and guilt and pain um, from taking some risk, which was a normal thing in my life to take calculated risk. And I just felt really burnt. And I took a pretty intentional 2 years where I scaled back everything in my life and really only focused on what I had the capacity for, which was making enough money to survive and live. And that was pretty much it. My community was my family members that felt safe. I lived with my grandma for 2 years. I felt like I slid back in a lot of ways. And then um, this time last year, I actually remember the Lord saying, I'm about to change your chapter. And I knew that I was going to change. I didn't really know how because I felt really stuck, really, really, really stuck in just what am I doing with my life? What do I believe? How do I make good decisions? Yeah, just stuck in all of it. Um, and I didn't really know where to go from there. I had done a lot of like inner healing work, had done a ton of like sozo, inner healing, prayer ministry, working one on one with therapists, etc., and just continued to feel stuck in my life. And honestly, I had a good friend who did coaching under you, and I had kind of heard about you and what you were doing. And I decided to join boot camp. And boot camp is with a handful, I believe we had like 15 people in boot camp that session. And just really felt like this could be a good decision forward for me. Like if everything else wasn't working, maybe I should try coaching. And I also just had a ton of peace in moving forward and working with you. So that's what I decided to do.
Yeah, and we were talking to you. It sounded like you said stuck, but I think a lot of people see stuck and then maybe don't realize the like where they're stuck. And one of the
hmm
things that you'd mentioned to me is that there was almost like you'd have faith context or
hmm
background, but maybe there was like a an identity crisis that you were
Yes.
staring down the hole, like you weren't in
Yes.
it, but you saw it. And you're going,
Yes.
hold on, I'm stuck. And if I don't do something, here I
hmm
go down the identity crisis
hmm
hole. And that includes, as a part of my identity, maybe what I believe and what I'm like
hmm
even considering as my upbringing roots,
Yeah.
which is a big part of that for you is faith.
Yeah. Totally. I think yeah, in that season of life I was questioning everything, including God. And like you said, like I know too much about God to walk away. like I have a lot of depth and DNA in God and faith-based background. But yeah, just felt really disconnected from it. And I like kind of what we were talking about. I knew in some way I needed to be tethered and able to walk through um, processing what God was to me, maybe processing a little bit of that disconnect. And a part of that identity crisis for me was, yeah, I was walking away from faith, but I wasn't walking away from God. Um, I again, like I know God and I have a relationship with God and I know who He is and He's too important to me. But I just felt like a lot of performance in my faith, um, a lot of identity in faith background, and I just wanted to rework that, but I wanted to do that in community with someone and also in a really safe place, and that's what this ended up being for me.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you've talked about healing, therapy, ministry. You're very familiar with that. Some people, when they start
Mhm.
coaching, they're not familiar with all that, but they just know Jesus. They're, like, on their walk, having spiritual
Yeah.
awakening, but for you, you're like, "I was super familiar with all that," and then I'm thinking coaching. So what was different about this? Because you said you had peace.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just as simple as the Lord going, "Yep, you're good,"
Mhm.
and you don't know why, but what did
Yes.
you think was different?
Honestly, that was a huge part of it. You can ask any of my friends when I was processing through, like, should I do this? Should I not do this? I had a ton of fear, um, mainly because I knew that working with someone in an intimate setting like coaching would reveal some areas of my life I didn't know if I was ready to confront yet. Um, but yeah, I just had an underlying piece about moving forward with coaching. I think too in boot camp, I don't know what I don't know if I could really identify what it was about you, but I felt really seen. I felt like that you knew you had enough understanding in your own walk of my personal background that I felt like I could trust you. And I know like people say to be seen is like to be seen is to be known and to be known is to be loved. And I just felt just a lot of peace and a lot of comfortability, especially during boot camp, to be able to trust you moving forward.
Yeah, which is a big deal because a lot of people who are experiencing any kind of crisis of faith or crisis of identity,
Yeah.
I was just talking about it with somebody else. It's not like, hey, here's a person who can speak on the X's and O's of the tactics of my career,
Mm-hmm.
which, frankly, that comes up during boot camp sometimes for people. And I coach on entrepreneurship and business and sales and money. And that happens later in the journey for a lot of people I'm working with. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not the first thing for most people because the deeper root is identity, rebuilding your identity and understanding
Yeah.
all the pieces that come with that. And as you're rebuilding identity, to have somebody speak into your life about that is like a
Mm-hmm.
very personal thing, especially
Yeah.
if you've ever experienced any kind of like disappointment. So you may have experienced, and this is not negative on anything of your past, it's more just observation of what people go through. We experience as people disappointment from leaders in our lives.
Yeah.
I'm sure, I know I've disappointed people.
Mm-hmm.
I've disappointed myself, frankly, in
Same.
times.
Same.
Um, right. So how do you reconcile that? That I'm sure must have been a reservation for you when you were thinking about receiving coaching guidance, because that's what I would
Yes.
call it, really, guidance and mentorship and coaching
Mm-hmm.
as a tool in the process of your rebuilding of identity, which was based on faith and performance driven. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
performance driven faith context, receiving
Yes.
guidance from somebody about how to rebuild that identity, and not in maybe like a pastoral way where it's like, hey, well, what did the
Yeah.
Bible say about this, which is not a bad thing,
Yes.
but receive it in a different way that's more
Mm-hmm.
challenging and activating and
Mm-hmm.
like confronting, holding the
Yeah.
mirror up, right? So
Yeah.
what was it that gave you the peace, knowing that that could have been a real roadblock given maybe past experiences with people speaking in your life?
Honestly, TJ, I was terrified. Honestly, like I I really felt like this is something just a little background. I feel like in my life, God, when He speaks to me, it's either He gives me a choice or He gives me very clear peace and direction. And in this aspect, I talk to every single close person in my life looking for confirmation that I should do this. And I can't explain to you, I just had peace. And I remember a conversation that you and I had where I was talking about going into, more one-on-one coaching with you. And I said, TJ, like I've been disappointed from people in the past. Like I don't really know how to trust you. I don't know if you remember that conversation. But yeah, I was like, I don't know how to trust you. Like I also have been walking through this alone for such a long time, and had felt really unvalidated in some of it, that I had a lot of fear moving into letting someone into my process, particularly honestly letting a man into my process. Um, and uh, yeah, I knew that this is something. I just felt like the Lord had an invitation for me waiting, and I didn't know what that looked like, and I didn't I did not expect to feel how I feel now and have the freedom that I have now. But I'm so 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 glad that I accepted God's invitation to, um, confront some things on a deeper level. And I think like something that Louis Giglio says that I heard from a really long time ago at a passion conference is, um, you can run fast alone, but you can run far together. And I've just been so blessed by, um, your ministry and your coaching, because I just feel like, yeah, you coach with a lot of love, and it's really blessed my life. So
Well,
yeah.
thank you. Yeah, and also too, that's something that um, is a very important balance to strike. Like there's a couple things I'll touch on. One is
Mhm.
being something that my wife Savannah and I, you've met the whole journey of me coaching, and then coaching both men and women, and knowing
Mhm.
how to have, okay, how do I have right boundaries?
Mhm.
Is this right? All of these things, navigating those questions, healthy vulnerability, and
Mhm.
I've had to have so many of those kinds of questions, especially earlier on in my coaching journey, to be able to then um, find that there are certain areas of life that I'm actually not the right person to speak into,
Totally.
and not being afraid to say, I'm not that person, but
Mhm.
I can direct you based on what I know. And
Mhm.
also, there is an opportunity for you to find who that person is for you. I think
Mhm.
that's super important for anybody watching, especially if you're a woman. Because
Mhm.
for me, one of the most important things is understanding that line and just making sure that that line is very clear. And, as a part of that, though, that's not too dissimilar. It's not too dissimilar. There's also the line of just being healthy as a leader.
Yes.
Leader meaning you're just leading somebody, guiding somebody, right? So
Mhm.
if like you're walking through the woods and somebody's in front of you, they're leading you, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of people that I'm coaching, they're walking through the wilderness, and I've been through the wilderness. I've literally like felt like I lived
Yeah.
there for a decade. So I just know the territory, and it's very easy for me to navigate and go, yep, don't go there. Don't, okay. Like, what do you think? And now I'm in the very much the zone of guiding and leading it by asking of like, okay, here's what this is. What do you think? And
Yeah.
being able to help people understand how to navigate their own way is so important. And being able to also let them know, like, you're not alone when you're walking without me. Like, you're
Mhm.
actually with God.
Mhm.
What does it look like to walk with
Yeah.
God? And
Yeah.
for me, that is the most important part of the healthy leadership part, which is, and by the way, I've not done all of this perfectly. It's been a process of learning. So,
Yeah.
but when you're talking about maybe some of the reservations of either having a man speak in, or having a leader at all speak into your life or guide, or
Mhm.
not wanting to do it alone, knowing that there's other people that can't, who have walked the journey, that you can say, hey, could I have some help?
Mhm.
Those reservations are very common, and especially the leadership
Yeah.
reservation of, like, because I've actually, some people I've worked with, they've even worked with other coaches that have just been not great examples for them,
Yeah.
and actually maybe even misguided in significant ways. And so, and by the way, I have a lot of compassion, because I'm like, when you're the person in the ring, who's like getting beat up all the time, and
Mhm.
people want to make comments and judgments from the seat in the stands. It's like it's very easy to be the person in the stands,
Yeah.
but when you're the man in the arena, the woman in the arena, oh
Yeah.
man, like you got blood on your face, you know? You're like,
Mhm.
come on,
You're like, "Please."
mistakes happen here. Like I'm out here
Yeah.
trying. So
Mhm.
I have compassion for other people and where we're all at on our journey, but also I recognize that it's really challenging to accept guidance after
Yeah.
you've been disappointed. And so I actually just want to talk about that, maybe even some of the changes that you've had, because really one of the things that, as you said, hey, I'm going to commit to change, you weren't committing to coaching, you know that?
Yeah.
You were committing to actually developing into the person you're becoming now. That's what you were
Mhm.
committing to. And so when somebody's considering coaching, they're actually not considering coaching. They're considering, do I actually want to make a change?
Yeah.
Do I
Yeah.
actually want to be held accountable to change? Because if I say yes to this, it's actually not about the other person.
Yeah.
It's about me,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
so when I look in the mirror, I got to go, did I do it? Right?
Mhm.
Did I actually follow through? Did I do it? And it's not like, hey, B, did you here's your scorecard for the week. Like that is
Yeah.
not my type of coaching, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's
what
not.
what is my type of coaching as far as that goes and how that changes look for you?
I just want to touch on, I think first and foremost, your type of coaching is lead by example. I think I can look at your life and spend any amount of time with you and Savannah and see that you put actions behind what you're suggesting and how you're leading and how you're coaching. And that for me was huge, just to be able to watch that. I think too, I can really appreciate in your coaching that you expect yourself to be human and you also expect us to be human. And that's one thing that's helped a lot of my performance driven self is you lead um, our coaching with a lot of grace. And one of my favorite things that you say that's changed my thought process throughout the year is what are your intentions? And a lot of time, like even I notice like my thought process and my inner dialogue now is like that was my intention and I did not make the mark, but that's okay. There's grace. And I think, yeah, I feel a lot of safety in the coaching because of those few things. And also how you continuously point me back to the Lord and to God, and how there's been multiple times in our coaching when I'm really stuck. And instead of you working through it, you're really good at inviting God into the room and just being like, okay, where is God in this? And what is he saying to you? And that, of course, is way more impactful than something that you would say, even though you're equipped to say it, I'm sure, every time. Um, you just continuously point me back to God, which in turn, it's like coaching with you and God. Which is someone that I do trust. So, yeah, you allow yourself to be human. You take the pressure off both you and me to have the answers, and you really allow me, and I've seen you allow others to walk through their process exactly where they are.
Yeah, and then not afraid to use tools. Tools are great,
Yeah,
you know?
tools are
Like
awesome.
having tools helps, right?
Mhm.
Having a foundation of things that can help guide you because I think where a lot of people get stuck to is if it just stays in like maybe a counseling ministry territory of just
Mhm.
like, what are you feeling all the time? And it's like, actually, let's break this down
Yes.
and let's
Yeah.
like call to action now. So what's the
Yeah.
CTA? What are we doing? When are we
Yeah.
doing it? You know, but the thing is when people sign up for coaching, they're expecting, hey, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire and you're going to be accountable or else. And then everything else
Mm-mm.
happens and you burn everything. And
Yeah.
like, it's
Yeah.
like, no, that's actually, first of all, not the healthiest thing for everybody,
Mhm.
although some people need it. And the
Mhm.
second piece though is, you know, you do need to be able to know when to activate somebody and
Yeah.
challenge them.
100%.
Right. And so
Mhm.
there's definitely where there's grace, there's also challenging. And I also want to, just I want to emphasize for people that you need to know kind of how the person is, what's their bent. So if
Mhm.
somebody's like their propensities to lay on the couch, then you might need to like activate them. If
Yeah.
somebody's propensity is to go run 15 miles even though they've been sick for 3 days, you might need to tell them to chill out. Right?
Mhm.
So you have to understand somebody's bent, somebody's personality, somebody's identity, right?
Mhm.
True identity and maybe the identity that they've lived into that's not healthy and you have to help
Yes.
guide them back into the identity that is aligned with God's way of thinking, right? And so for you,
Mhm.
for example, being performance driven with a lot of people I'm working with,
Yeah.
myself as an example, others I work with as an example, there's a lot of the I'm just going to run through walls in my life,
Yep.
and that has its end. That definitely will not end well.
Yeah.
So
It has not ended well for me.
it does not end well. So biggest change that you can say over the last, let's call it year now.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a tough one. Biggest change? I'm gonna touch on a few. I think one of the biggest for me is I have recognized, and everyone in my life has recognized as well. So I think this is a big marker. Is that uh, when one, I feel really confident making decisions, um, and especially not so worried about making the wrong decision anymore. Being performance driven, like I was always worried about making the wrong decision and also being inconsistent in my character was something I really struggled with, which allowed no space for me to be human or even figure out who I was. um, so I would say like the release of shame and guilt and freedom in my life, with some of the tools that you've given me, and also just walking through a lot of basics. Like we've worked over the last 6 months on really stabilizing for me. Like you say, stabilize so we can optimize and just simplifying my life. And what that's done for me has provided a ton of freedom in every area. And I feel like I can show up on a daily basis really authentically, without shame. And that's something that I struggled with shame in every area. Every area. I just feel like I could never get out of the shame spiral, which was part of my identity crisis. So I'd say that's definitely one of my biggest ones. Also, letting myself go through the process, again, being performance driven, so hard for me to let myself just go through the process, to love myself through the process. Really hard for me to not have negative inner dialogue when going through a process and not being perfect. I've noticed all of that has changed. I also have recognized, in my personal walk with God, um, that coaching has really tethered me. Like I said in the beginning, I felt like I was walking away from faith, and maybe in some of that, I was walking away from God too. And coaching has really tethered me in my walk with God to allow me to have freedom, if that makes any sense. Like if coaching is my tether in allowing myself to freely explore identity and my walk with God and figuring out what's true to me, um, that's what this has been for me. And there's just been a lot of freedom in my life.
It's amazing to hear. So these are, by the way, these are byproducts of a renewed mind, right?
Yeah.
Like Romans 12:2, being transformed by the renewing of your mind. There's an actual biological change that happens in your body. You do
Mhm.
feel different, and when you start having renewal of your mind because you start thinking different, you have
Yeah.
different thought process. Again, that you'd mentioned, like the negative self-talk or the negative dialogue that you'd have, and that
Mhm.
shifting, the default dialogue shifting from negative to positive, or even not just positive, which I think is sometimes an unhealthy goal. How
Mhm.
about just like authentic
Just
and not
real. Yeah.
shaming? Like,
Yeah.
authentic doesn't have to be shameful.
Yeah.
And also not getting so swirly into like, is this the devil? Is this me? Is this
Yeah.
God? Is this all these other things? It's like, oh, hold on a second,
Mhm.
pause. Like there's a healthy place of just kind of sitting in reality for a second,
Mhm.
not letting all these other things get swirly, and then finding grounding and then coming into agreement with, okay, God, but this is who the person I'm becoming, the version
Yeah.
2.0 of who I'm becoming, which we talk about all the time in boot camp
Yes, we do.
and even after. And it's so important because it's that vision of the person you're becoming that can help you kind of come back to, all right, this is where I'm going. Like this is no, there's no perfect puzzle.
Mhm.
It is actually just simply like the picture of Jesus is a character, as his character gives me a guide. Like I'm
Yeah.
made in his image. That's a guide. I know that he's made me in certain ways. I'm not fully him. I'm part parts of him are in me, but I'm in him and he's in me, and I get to make that choice every day. Like, okay, these are the things that he's highlighted in me. I get to make that choice. Who am I becoming now?
Mhm.
And learning to accept things that we can't control and agree with things that we want to
Mhm.
agree with that are in God's ways of thinking for us. Those are such big important things. All of that part of the renewed mind. And as a result, you experience that freedom where it's not this heaviness in your mind too. There can be a
Yeah.
real heaviness, shame spirals, all kinds of that. I call it like the swirl. You can go out
Mhm.
in the swirl, and sometimes that swirl can take you out for like 3 days.
Mhm.
It can cause you to feel anxious, stressed, shut down, get sick physically. It
Mhm.
can cause you to have all kinds of issues, but even show up like just off with it, whether it's for work or in relationship, whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
the fact that that's happening in your mindset is huge. What's like maybe I don't know, 2, 3 measurable things that you've actually seen in your life?
Um, yeah, I mean, if we're gonna talk about some basics, I think like I talked to you, I think last week about the daily threes, the walk, water, worship. Um, just how consistency has affected my life is probably a huge measurable for me. I feel like just measuring how I was at the beginning of the year to now, I have so much more capacity. So much more capacity. It's amazing, actually. Which was another thing I felt shameful about was that I had no capacity for the things that actually made me come to life, which in my life personally is um, entrepreneurship, creativity, people that I love, just like every area. I just had no capacity, and I'm noticing a ton of more capacity, which in turn makes me feel really confident and able to show up because I actually have the capacity to show up. So that would be a big one. I think also just another measurable if you didn't know me and you watched my life over the last couple years, I love to travel. I love to try new things. I love to try new places. And before this year, I hadn't done any of that. I didn't feel confident enough. I had a ton of fear. Um, and I think just another measurable for me is I'm living in a new city, and I couldn't have done that a year ago just because of the fear I felt. And just like feeling not like myself. Like I felt like I couldn't do the things that I used to love doing because I couldn't show up as myself. So that's another measurable, and maybe I think about one more. Yeah, I think I keep repeating it, but I just feel a lot more authentic.
Yeah, I think that's such a I mean, you've got facts and feelings there, and those are
Yeah,
both important. When you're
yeah,
thinking about, like if you hadn't decided, and I say sign up for coaching, but
uh-huh.
like really sign up for yourself because you
Change,
were
yeah.
making that change. You were signing up to make change, right? So what
Hmm.
would have happened, you think? I mean, it's you just kind of look back over a year, right? So you think
Yeah,
what would have happened?
I think honestly, I was progressively because I had no direction. I just felt like I was progressively walking away from myself, and like not to be morbid, but I feel like um I just felt like I was, like, dying inside, like, I had no direction, um, no and really the direction was for what was going on inside, which obviously, when you deal with what's going on inside, it affects every area of your life, but, yeah, I think that if I hadn't and who knows, but if I hadn't chosen to move forward with coaching, I knew I was at a crossroads, that's the thing. I knew I had a choice, which was to confront and step into welcoming change into my life or to continue down the path I was going down, which just was riddled with pain, honestly. And to be quite vulnerable and frank, like I have a lot of people in my life around me that I watched them come to that crossroad and continue to choose pain and not confront the things in their life. And I didn't want to look like that. And I noticed in myself the areas which were covered in shame, but I could see them, were um, that I just kept choosing pain. And I didn't want to continue to do that, but it was a really hard decision for me to confront all of those things. So I think, yeah, I think I would have been just a more painful person, confused. I'm still in my spiral, and hopeless, maybe even. Yeah, I felt hopeless. So
Well, well done and praise God, because that is, in my view, God gives us the ability, not just in choice, but also the ability to make the choice. Like,
yeah,
I really believe it's a gift that God gives us, the ability to make the choice and then the actual empowerment to make the choice.
yeah,
Two things, not just, hey, you get choice, do it. It's like, actually, he also empowers you to make the choice. And it's
yeah.
just amazing that you felt that empowerment to make the choice and were able to even recognize, hey, I am at that crossroads. Because I think a lot of people resonate with that. You're at a crossroads,
Mhm.
choose pain down the path I'm on, whatever
Yeah.
that looks like. Job I hate,
Mhm.
life I see people dying inside around me. Because
Mhm.
I can tell you countless stories of what that looks like, right?
Yeah.
Of choose pain, choose people dying inside all around me and not seeing hope, not seeing a way out, or choose change and the unknown.
Mhm.
And I don't
Mhm.
know what that is, but I hope
Mhm.
that it's better than this.
Yeah.
Somebody once told me, they said, when you realize with 100% certainty that the path you're going down is not the path for you, then the 1% chance that this path could be a possibility that has hope for you looks pretty darn good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So even that tiny bit of mustard seed of hope, that 1% chance, that little glimmer of light,
Mhm.
change can be good for you. Like, if you're listening and you're going, wow, that path of pain thing, like, that makes total sense to me, because I'm in a toxic work environment. I've got toxic relationships and I don't know how to get out of the, what I call, like, the goop. It's like total
Yeah. It
goop
is
that you can
cool.
get stuck in.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
sometimes, by the way, it's bloodline generational. Sometimes it's choices you made. Sometimes
Totally.
it's a combination of all of these things.
Mhm.
But we gravitate towards what we're familiar with, whether it's healthy or not.
Mhm.
And so you have to find people who have navigated out.
Yes.
You have to
Yes.
find them. They are out there. If you're watching, you're listening to people navigating their way out by the grace of
Listen.
God. Okay?
Don't do
Somebody,
it.
somebody get out of the goop, raise your hand. And I would say, like, if you were to just put a cherry on top of all this,
Yeah.
it is helpful. Everything you shared, I think you've actually shared some really good nuggets. I'm like trying to take some notes, writing them down too. But why would you recommend not
Mm.
coaching, but even the act of, like, hey, I'm going to commit. I'm at that crossroads, and yeah,
Yeah.
coaching's an option. Why would you recommend it to somebody if one reason?
This is gonna sound so cliche, but the first thing I think of is that you're worth it, and that your future's worth it, and that your generations under you are worth it. Um, that's why I chose this. Um, is because I want something different for my kids. I want something different for my life, and I'll never forget TJ on one of our coaching calls. I was sitting with God and you were making me have an encounter with God and I didn't want it. I was like, I don't want to do this right now. Please don't make me do this. And
With permission,
yeah, with
with
permission.
permission.
Yes,
Yes.
with permission. And but I remember being so you're like, but you're still not open. And I was like, I know. But I just remember God saying, uh, my decision making for coaching is I wanted something different for my kids and the generations under me. And he said, what if this is for you too? And I didn't know how to receive that. I was not in a place to receive that. And I'd lived a lot of my life for everyone else. So receiving God for me, woo, 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 emotions, they're coming up. Yeah, I think I would say like the cherry on top is that your life is worth it. And also the love that comes from receiving is worth it every time.
Totally. Well said. Yeah, really well said. B, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for sharing.
Same
Thanks for your
TJ, I
story.
appreciate you.
Yeah. All right, guys, let me end this stream. And by the way, if you guys are watching and you're resonating with things that B's been talking about, um, you can always reach out. You can send a message. You can just say the word ready, or you can say, hey, I watched B's story. We'll know, myself, my team will know exactly what you're talking about, and we can connect, talk about coaching, see if it's the right time, right fit. Very much happy to tell you if things are not the right time or fit. But if you're ready for change, if you're at that crossroads and like, hey, it's time to commit to something different, and that this could be a route for you, and you feel like there's peace around that, definitely reach out. Do not hesitate. One more day, one more
Do it.
hour, reach out, because literally the next step is not even a commitment. It is a phone call.
Mm.
So appreciate you guys watching and listening.